Hey, Fed Heads, welcome back to another episode of Sharing Our Pairings. We're here live on Facebook, broadcast around the world on the Armed Forces Radio Network, and of course available on your favorite podcast catcher or as a rebroadcast on the YouTubes. I'm your host, Trip, here with my co-host, Dennis, and a very special guest, Robert Holt. How are you guys doing?
Awesome, man. Very good.
Hey, I appreciate it, Dennis. Trip, good to be with you guys. I don't know if it's a special guest, but we get to drink beer and smoke cigars together. So bless us for being part of it.
You're always a special guest, Robert.
As in special ed?
I'll let you choose.
We'll let them choose.
And so before we start getting into the show, I do want to mention I've got a little widget, and it is working. So that's what I was going to say. I've got this little widget. You'll see it in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. It's a little small right now. I think I got to bump up the this is a live beta test right here. So we've got a live scroll of your comments. So when you comment, people who are watching on YouTube or after the fact are going to be able to see those comments real time. Lou Rodriguez says, I still haven't painted that room. I mean, bro, this is my garage. I don't spend a lot of time thinking about the walls in my garage, but because of you and a couple other eagle-eyed viewers who have noticed, you can't see it. It's just off camera, but I've got some paint right here and a roller and a tray and everything. I just need to have time to do it. All right. So, of course, Sharing Our Pairings is, as you probably know if you're watching, is a show where we smoke cigars and we drink some beverages. And tonight we've got a, kind of a special cigar, but a special cigar because the man who blended it is here with us tonight. So this is the Souther Draw Jacob's Ladder. And for those unaware, our special guest, Robert, here is the founder and chief evangelist. Is that right?
Right.
Of Souther Draw Cigars. So why don't we start off by just talking about this blend a little bit and where it came from and what makes it special?
Again, I appreciate you guys having me on, get an opportunity to share about the cigar and really the message behind the cigar. I'm sure a lot of folks have seen or heard about it since IPCPR release, right? We all released it at the show. But Jacob's Ladder, let's talk about the message first. First of all, my son's name is Ethan Jacob. Most people that have interacted with us down the road know. He's a big, bold, strong kid. He's about my size, about 6'3". He's a big kid, right? But he's got a little sweetness, a little subtleness to it, a lot of spirit. And really this blend really encapsulates his characteristics, his personalities. He's traveled quite a bit to the factory in Esteli. We really put him in charge of detail-oriented things that I'm not good at, which is packaging, UPC code, SKUs, boxing, packaging, and shipping, logistics stuff. He's a little more attentive to detail, right? And then the other side of this is obviously much like our core line. Jacob's Ladder is a flowering plant that this color scheme really emulates that flower, the Jacob's Ladder. And the third point in this message is it is a biblical reference, just like our Rose of Sharon. It is a reference to Jacob's dream, where basically he had a dream of this ladder that went from heaven to earth with angels coming up and down, and where he was reminded that he has an inheritance and he has responsibilities, and he's going to be held accountable. And really our objective in this story was exposing Ethan at a young age to an incredible art form, an incredible culture, incredible time with the media and the consumers and the retailers. Is if this is the vehicle that he chooses to inherit, this brand and this company, this is a pretty good start. So here's to Ethan Jacob, and being the inspiration behind this new release from us. And then I think the blend is important, right?
Yeah, a little bit.
I don't think people that have smoked Souther Draw for the last 3 or 4 years, Trip, have any doubt that I love, absolutely adore, well-fermented, aggressively fermented Pennsylvania broadleaf, even over the very popular Connecticut broadleaf. Most importantly, kudos to AJ Fernandez Cigar Company and their incredible fermentation program. So that was chosen for the wrapper. As you see, it's very toothy, very veiny. It's not smooth like the kudzu where it's box press, right? You can see some of the veins here. This is a double Maduro. It's Nicaraguan filler, made up 100% of Nicaraguan filler, but most importantly, this is also a double Ligero. We have 25% Esteli Ligero for the power. We have 25% Jalapa Ligero, which really brings in that rich, in my opinion, a richer power, a sweeter power, kind of allows it to be approachable for people that wouldn't pick up a double Maduro, double Ligero otherwise. And I think it really tempered it down a little bit for basically a double broadleaf, double Ligero cigar.
And it's fantastic. So, I mean, and now that you mention it, I absolutely can taste the Jalapa Ligero and Esteli Ligero in there. The Esteli Ligero is like that black and white pepper on your palate, and then when you retrohale, it's like it burns kind of, but kind of in a good way. I feel like I enjoy that. And then you get that like rich, meaty sweetness from the Jalapa Ligero. I love it.
Both very key points and intended, and I'm glad you picked up. They're not really nuanced flavors in this cigar, as you just pointed out.
Yeah, certainly not. And to me, it's the kind of cigar where if you're not paying too much attention to it, I always say mowing the lawn, even though I don't recommend anybody smoke something like this while they're mowing the lawn. It deserves your attention.
Absolutely.
But if you're smoking it while you're typing on your laptop or watching a movie or something like that, not giving it your full attention, you're still going to enjoy it a lot. And I feel like that's a key point. There are a lot of cigars that are only enjoyable if you pay full attention to them, or they fall flat if you pay full attention to them, and they're kind of better as a yard guard that you're just kind of smoking while you're not paying attention. And this is kind of the best of both worlds.
And talking about construction too, in that regard, the burn is awesome on this.
Oh,
solid, thick, nice and heavy, just exactly what you want. So this is a cigar definitely you don't have to sit there and baby it. You can smoke it, you can kick it around a little bit, and it'll still keep going.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys.
And before we get into our first beverages here, I know, Robert, I can tell you're itching to get at that beer.
I've been on the wagon.
We have an audience question from Warren Watton, which you can see in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen if you're watching on Facebook. Robert, do you have a preferred size that you use when you make a new blend?
I don't know if it's preferred, but the short answer is for our core line production, every cigar is blended. The final blend that goes into the aging room before full production is a Toro 652. And that's with all the core line. The only difference in that would be when you get into the quick draw line, which are intended to be smaller, classic style, 30 to 45 minute cigars, we actually use a 5.5 by 40 short panatella, kind of a gringo version of a panatella.
Great size.
As that barometer, if you will. So 652 Toro in all of our full size core line blends is always what we blend to, and then we adjust the ratios. And again, as I said earlier, before we went live, the aging and fermentation of the filler is adjusted based on the final vitola that we choose. For example, the Gordo gets more.
Which is really interesting. As far as I know, not a lot of factories do that. They kind of use the same tobaccos throughout the line. Is that unique, or is that just something I've never noticed before?
I think it's probably both. I don't think it's common practice, but if you're small and everything you put out is basically a risk to your entire brand and reputation, you've got to do some extra things.
Yeah.
But that comes with having the right partners and the right resources that have tobacco from the previous years or have more age and fermentation. So being able to, for the 6.560, for example, to have fillers that have more age and more fermentation or have a little more robustness, a little more defined complexity, if you will, sure makes it worth doing. I think there's probably more of it that goes on than is ever advertised.
Yeah. There's a lot of that in the industry, that there are processes that everybody does that they just don't think about. And so they never advertise it, and it's just something that kind of flies under the radar. Right. But we're not only here to talk about cigars. We're here to talk about beers. This is our Brews and Ladders show. I tried to come up with a word that kind of rhymes with shoots for beer, but I couldn't figure it out. If we were doing shots, it could have been shooters and ladders, but I mean,
ladders would have worked.
So my first beer is, let me get it in focus there, Bourbon County Stout. This is actually not the stout. This is actually the barley wine. So it's of course from, I mean, probably everybody's heard of this, but I'll kind of go over their history a little bit. This is from Goose Island Brewing. They're founded in Chicago as a brew pub in 1988, and then they opened their first commercial brewery in 95. And in 2011, they were kind of the first big craft brewery to be bought by Anheuser-Busch. Like when I mean, it's not really a craft beer boom right now, but it's kind of like the golden age of craft beer, I guess. And that was kind of the beginning of it coming to the forefront. And so, I mean, say what you will about Anheuser-Busch, this beer is still very good. I don't think Bourbon County has fallen flat ever when I've had it. So this is the barley wine variant of their Bourbon County series. The typical one is the stout that everybody sees. So this is a traditional English style barley wine that they then age in bourbon barrels. And I actually learned in my research, they used to use third use barrels for this particular beer. And this year they switched to second use barrels, which means that the whiskey came out and then the beer went in. So previously they were probably using Bourbon County stout barrels after they held stout. They switched to the barley wine. These are kind of more fresh barrels. So supposedly you should get a little bit more of that bourbon character. Clocks in at so I am going to say I'm doing 3 barrel-aged beers this time. And I'm not going in order of alcohol. I'm going in order of style. So this one is a barley wine, and then I've got a couple darker ones coming up. But this is a whopping 14.4% ABV. It's a heater.
But you know, you can't really taste it, right? I actually had it a couple of weeks ago, and it was so smooth. You couldn't notice that it was 14. If I didn't tell you, you wouldn't know.
Yeah, it's really not as strong as it seems. Which one of you guys wants to go first, describing your beer while I take a couple sips of this barley wine?
Robert, you can go ahead.
Okay.
Go for it, Robert.
I'm going to take everybody down a little trip to Texas, and we're going to go with also 3 barrel-aged, but distinctly different, which we'll get one by one. But we're going to start off with the Jester King, El Cedro. And to translate that means the cedar, right? So it's a little bit lighter. This is Jester King in Austin, has been around for a decade, and it's a growing microbrewery, but known for their farmhouse ale style.
Yeah.
But because of the cigar that we chose for tonight, and the fact that we start this cigar with a cedar sleeve, it has some of those aromas on the nose. Almost everybody picks that up, even before the sleeve, but the sleeve really enhanced it. This El Cedro is it's a cedar stay barrel aged beer. So this is very hoppy. It's a Citra hoppy. They use Citra hops, so it does have a lot of fruitiness on the nose. Does have that kind of that dried citrus as you would expect. But it's aged in Spanish cedar, not just cedar, but in Spanish cedar.
Wow, that's really interesting. I didn't expect that. I assumed it was going to be normal cedar.
Well, and you can see it. I mean, it looks like I just took a urinalysis, but but that cedar really comes out right on the nose immediately, and it is really bright, and it has that almost a pineapple note to it. But I tell you what, it's an unfermented beer. It's an unpasteurized beer, and I really thought maybe that breadiness, that toasted, characteristic might come through and complement well this first third of this cigar. So it's got a real long finish to it, but that cedar really sits on the palate. It's kind of like if you throw a cedar log in the fireplace, which I have next to me here, and you draw in a couple of those, couple of whiffs, or use a spliff to light your cigar. It really has that finish. So we're going to start off. It's only 8%, so you've trumped me. Trip has trumped
a little bit.
but we're going to get it started, and I'm falling off the wagon today, so I'm going to start small today. But we're going to try this El Cedro from Jester King here in Austin, Texas.
That sounds fantastic, and it sounds like, the fact that they called it El Cedro and used Spanish cedar specifically. Makes it seem like it was really kind of meant to go with cigars.
It's kind of cool. Yeah, that's a cool design.
Well, I hope they call me tomorrow and send me over a couple of racks of these. I could share them because they're pretty proud of them. They're pretty. I tell you what, I it's a good way to start.
Dennis, what are you drinking?
All right, so I actually don't have any barrel-aged stuff tonight, and I ended up going with some IPAs, which is normal for me, but I go with the weird stuff, right? So my first IPA of the night, let me bring the camera up, is really weird, man. It's called Coffee-Nade. It's a coffee lemonade IPA. Wow. Which is strange, right? Kind of thing like that. That has the potential to be really good or just really horrible, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this actually comes from Evil Twin Brewing Company, and this was a collaboration project with Omnipolo from Sweden, and it comes in at 7%, so it's not bad. It's not too strong at all. Kind of what you would expect it to look like. Yeah, I mean, for me, yeah, it's a session, right? But the thing that's really cool about this, it has the coffee flavor is not overpowering. It's really subtle. It's subtle enough where you know there's some coffee in there, but it's not kind of like, it doesn't take away from the notes of the hops. And this is also citra-based, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. But the cool thing about this is the sourness. The lemon flavor comes out so well. And with the cigar, especially the first third of the cigar, the spice that you get, that really nice kick of the black pepper, gets mellowed out really well from the citrus and the sour notes. And it's almost like a palate cleanse. So I'm loving it so far, man.
That sounds awesome. So I feel like coffee and IPA go together way better than anyone would
surprisingly,
expect.
Right?
Like, if you have the right amount, you don't get too much of like that earthy coffee kind of sweetness. You just get kind of those bitter notes, which complement the hops really well. And then I feel like the lemon part could go really well with the hops fruitiness.
And yeah, and the lemon cuts a lot of that bitterness that you would expect from the coffee, and also from the IPA to an extent. But it's almost like, imagine if you took a mug that had coffee in it and you emptied it out and you just poured an IPA. It's basically like that.
Okay.
Very subtle.
So my barley wine, I'll hold it up here. It's not
gorgeous.
quite as dark as it looks here. It's kind of a dark, hazy brown. And it's got a lot of sweetness from those bourbon barrels. And of course, because it's a barley wine, and you get so much bourbon flavor out of this. Like, it tastes like there's a shot of bourbon in the glass. But that, like, the oakiness of the bourbon and the like kind of vanilla sweet notes go really well with the cigar. Like the spice and the intensity of the kind of earthy flavors of the cigar go really well with this beer.
That's nice.
How's your first pairing going, Robert?
You know, it's maybe coming from being unfiltered and unpasteurized. It's really got a maltiness to it now that really kind of sits heavy, a nice little malt, and I find that characteristic at the beginning of this cigar quite a bit. So it just now kind of met in the middle. But I'll tell you what it did. Just this last 3 or 4 draws on this cigar is, I could imagine if this cigar had 3 or 4 or 5 years of age on it, and I pulled it out of the aging room and I pulled that sleeve off, and you know how you open an old box of Cubans or an old box of Fuente, Añejo or something that had that cedar sleeve, and it's 3 or 4 years old and it's been sitting in your aging room, and it has this incredible aroma coming off, and when you light it is present. Yeah. So what I feel like it did is with the cedar aging on this beer is I feel like it accelerated this process. This cigar developing even more flavor, or deeper flavor with that citrus and even that maltiness than it has, you know, in its first year release. So I can imagine that's how that cigar is really going to develop in the years to come, and it kind of gets me excited a little bit because it's clean, but it's still it's just malty, bready, and that cedar just kind of lingers, and it's a nice little soft flavor it's not nuanced anymore. It's there. It's on the palate. It's on the tip of the tongue, but it just kind of sits there and finishes off nice and clean. So I would say it complements it very well. Not really what I expected, but it really brought out even more intensity in the already, you know, the pre-existing flavors that I knew this cigar to have. So kudos to Jester King and El Cedro.
That sounds really good. Very good.
So we need to get some now.
Yeah, I need to try
to
that.
Find some.
Dennis, how's your pairing going?
Oh man, I'm loving it. It's real, especially now that it's warming up, and I'm somebody that likes IPAs a little bit warmer than straight out of the fridge, and you do as well.
Yeah.
And a lot of that character comes out. You get a lot of that body just developing as it warms up.
All right, before we move on to our next pairing, we've got a quick break for one of our sponsors. We'll be right back.
Brought to you by Gurkha Cigars. Gurkha Cigars, makers of the world's finest cigars. Try the 93 rated Heritage featuring Rosado, Ecuadorian Habano wrapper, Nicaraguan binder, and Dominican, Pennsylvania, and Nicaraguan fillers. Blended by Gurkha's blending team at American Caribbean Cigars, it is hand-rolled Nicaraguan, available in 35-count boxes. Talk to your local B&M about the Heritage today, or talk to them about other fine Gurkha cigars. Whatever your taste preferences, Gurkha has a cigar that's right for you.
We're back. All right, and we're back. So we've had our first pairing. I had the barley wine, which I kind of don't want to move on from this pairing because it's a really good barley wine. It goes really well with the cigar. But I'm going to introduce my next one anyway. And you'll notice me in my little corner of the screen kind of investigating this bottle. So this is from Breakside Brewing, and I'll explain why I'm investigating after. They call it Cultivating Mass, which, Dennis, you probably get that joke. Some of you guys probably get that joke. It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia joke. This beer doesn't make you fat, it makes you cultivate mass. But a really interesting thing, this came out the week before Halloween, and the brewery hid an Easter egg somewhere on this bottle, and I haven't found it yet, but somewhere on this bottle there's something about the Nightman. They say you have to find the Nightman, and that apparently gives you the address and time of their Halloween party.
Oh, cool.
Which is a really cool kind of promotion to do. So while we're talking, I'm probably going to peel this label off and get into this and try to figure it out a little bit. But this is a Baltic porter that is aged in rye barrels for 18 months. And if you're not familiar with Breakside, you probably haven't watched this show a lot because I feature them a lot. They were founded in 2010 in Northeast Portland as a restaurant and a brew pub. And then in 2013, they expanded and opened a production facility down in my neck of the woods in Southeast Portland. And previously, they were only available in the Pacific Northwest, like in Washington and Oregon and a little bit in Idaho. But I found out today they've expanded their distribution so much. They're available in California. They're available in a couple places on the East Coast, like in the Northeast, New York, Pennsylvania kind of area, and like the South Carolinas kind of area. They became famous in Portland. They became local heroes because they brewed 100 beers in a year. The 100th of which was their version of Pliny the Younger. It was a triple IPA that was crazy, crazy hoppy. And they still make that every couple of years. But they make very good beer. I'm really excited to try this one. It's one of their limited releases this fall. And it clocks in at only 10.5% ABV and 30 IBUs. So I'm going to take a couple sips, let Robert talk about his next beer here.
I kind of want to drink yours. Well, I'm going to stay in, and here we go. Adalbert Brewery. This is Triple B, a.k.a. Bad Boy Brew. So this is where we're going to go up to our Belgian style. So this is a triple. What I liked about this one, and it's a new brewery to me. I haven't had any of their previous releases, but every November they release this Triple B, and some local guys that have been making beer obviously for some time. I guess that's how it always starts, right? We all get together.
Oh yeah.
we find somebody to put them in a bottle, and we find a way to get a label made, and we sell them like cigars, right? But this is an oak barrel aged, and this is a bottle rested or bottle conditioned triple. So every November they release it, and it's one of those beers that when you talk to the few, your trusted, brothers and sisters that really enjoy beer, they tell you, don't be scared that they just released it in November. This thing is ready because it's been bottle conditioned. It's time for you to drink this thing. So I've been kind of anxious. It's been staring at me. It came with a nice cork, and I don't know if you heard the cork pop up.
Yeah. Yep.
But obviously that secondary fermentation's happening in that bottle, right? I think we could all hear that pop. I almost hit the ground when I heard it. So I'm going to move up to a 9.3% Belgian triple. Which this time of year, most people have moved to porters and stouts, but I like triples and quads this time of year. It doesn't get as cold down here, so we'll step up in January, February for the porters and stouts, the seasonals. But Adalbert's Brewery, Triple B Bad Boy Brew. Again, this is that it just on the nose that oak barrel aging really comes through. It's not a bourbon barrel age. It's an American oak is what it is. It's kind of light and subtle, and I'll show you. It's almost a bronze color. 9.3. If you looked at that, you would probably think it's probably in that 5 to 6, range. But it's kind of a nice little bronze color here, a little orange, if you will, and it's supposedly it's going to be very complex and throw me for a loop with some different herbs and other things. But we're going to get to that in a minute. But let me give it a tug on this. The Adalbert's Brewing Triple B Belgian.
Enjoy.
It sounds great. All right, I'm going to jump into my next beer. It is actually from a brewery I've never heard of before. I picked it up in the store randomly because I thought the name was really cool. And so this is called Lord Hobo Brewing Company. The beer is called Boom Sauce. Kind of a funky,
it's a great name.
Can. Great name, right? And these guys are based out of Massachusetts, and they're from a place called Woburn, Massachusetts. I'm not sure where that is, but their whole thing is they specialize in New England style, just any kind of beer that they can make. So IPAs, pale ales, and this is their flagship. So in this, the interesting thing about this is they have a blend of spelt, oat, and wheat, which is pretty cool. And they have a lot of hops. They have 6 different hops, including Mosaic, Falconer's Flight, Amarillo. So a lot of really intense, super citrusy, very tropical, kind of fruity hops. And it's really not overpowering. It's 7.8%, so it's still in that kind of sessionable, like East Coast session type of beer. And, it's not actually, I was a little surprised. It's not what you would expect if you've had a lot of New England style IPAs. It's not as sort of thick and creamy and cloudy. It's a little more clear than typical, but it's really solid. The hop flavor, those 6 varieties really pop.
Nice.
And I'm digging it.
So mine it's different than I was expecting. For Baltic Porter, I was expecting it to be a little lighter than an Imperial Stout. A Baltic Porter is kind of an Imperial Porter. This tastes like an Imperial Stout to me. It's like, and it's heavy and syrupy on the palate, which unfortunately conflicts with the cigar a little bit. I feel like it covers up some of the spicy, sweet notes of the cigar, and you end up really only getting like some cedar and some like dark earthy flavors. And I'm missing that spice now. But sometimes pairings go that way.
Yeah.
The beer itself is very good, but I can see why they gave it the name they did. It tastes so heavy. Like, even though it's only 10%, which, I mean, 10% is high, but it's not crazy. I wouldn't want 2 of these. It would be way too much for me. And I couldn't find the Nightman. I don't know if maybe that was on a previous release that I was reading about, but I failed. There was no Nightman.
Like the Wonka golden ticket you're looking for.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
All 5 of them have already been found.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Halloween was a couple months ago.
This is true. I have to say, I'm getting some really nice heavy cedar notes from the cigar now at this point. I'm pretty far in. just getting to the primary band, and I really like it. It's a really kind of in your face cedar, but in a good way. It's not like that subtle afterthought cedar. It's really popping out of the cigar.
Beautiful.
How about yours, Robert? How's that triple?
Well, kind of just the opposite of yours. You know, you think of a triple or quad Belgian maybe as that richer, thicker, syrupier kind of residual sugar that's in that. And for me, this is much lighter than I thought it would be. But what it's done is it's brought to the front nuances in a cigar that typically I only get if I retrohale it. I know the cigar, I blended the cigar, I've been smoking it for years, but now I don't even have to retrohale. So really what this has done, there's a toffee butteriness to this, but there's a clove element to it that really I find in the cigar when I have the cigar by myself just with a cup of coffee and I retrohale it, almost like a sweet pepper, right? It's like mixing honey and red pepper together, but it's really coming out now on this particular beer, and even that burnt sugar and a touch of maybe like cinnamon. It's like you knock the crust off a creme brulee, but it's still got a lot of body to it. So it's brought out some elements in the cigar that typically might be disguised at this point. So I'm actually enjoying it. It's on the lighter side. But it's such a clean finish. So every draw of the cigar and every sip of the beer, it's a whole new experience. And then it kind of it's not for a heavy cigar. This thing really is clean on the palate to me. It doesn't.
Yeah, it really is.
And this beer has allowed that clove and that vanilla and that burnt sugar to really come through on this second part of the second third of the cigar. And I'm actually enjoying the brightness of it.
Yeah, that is kind of the opposite of my experience. And now that I put the beer down for a couple minutes, I really do taste that red pepper and honey. I get exactly the same thing. I completely know what you mean. And we got Chico Ray watching from Orlando. He just says, "What's up, guys?" Chico, if you're just joining us, we're smoking the Southern Draw Jacob's Ladder. It is a very strong cigar. Double Ajero, double broadleaf, or is it double Pennsylvania broadleaf?
It's double broadleaf. We'll leave it at that.
Okay.
But it's double broadleaf, double Ajero.
Yeah, it's an intense experience, this cigar. And I just took off my second band there because I've kind of reached that point. And before we introduce our final beers here, we're just going to take one more break. We'll be right back after a message from our sponsor.
This show is sponsored by Cigar Oasis. Don't spend all your time worrying about your cigar wrappers cracking, splitting, or falling apart from humidity fluctuation issues. Set it and forget it by choosing Cigar Oasis, a professional solution which provides equal distribution of humidity with precise electronic controls. Monitor your cigars to the internet using the Smart Humidor Wi-Fi attachment. Why don't you spend all your time enjoying your cigars and relaxing and let Cigar Oasis protect your cigars? Cigar Oasis has solutions for any humidor. Make sure you set it and forget it today.
Very subtle cigar to absorb and maybe even enhance each one of those individually. A lighter or milder bodied Connecticut would actually probably allow each one of those hops to come through and those characteristics. That's just my own palate, but a medium to full bodied cigar on something with that much character, it's going to get muddled and muddy.
Yeah,
my
absolutely.
Experiences.
So we came back from the break there while Robert was talking. We were just talking about Dennis's beer. Dennis, talk about your beer for our faithful listeners and viewers here.
So, the beer on its own, New England style IPA, 6 different hops. It's really complex. It's really nice. Unfortunately, the hops kind of took over that sweet pepper of the cigar, and it's just staying on the palate. It's not going away. So sadly, this beer I think is not doing too well with the cigar.
And like I said
individually,
before,
they're fantastic.
That exact situation happens. You can have a fantastic beer and a fantastic cigar, and if they don't match, they don't match. So my last beer, I'm going to show you the can here. It's in a crowler that Dennis is going to recognize.
What that is? Wait, hold on. I have check out my glass.
There you
can't
go.
See it, I guess. Same place.
So this is a crowler from Rattle and Hum in New York City. They're, of course, Dennis's local beer bar.
My second job.
Yeah. And Dennis sent me this beer, so that's why I have it. It's from a brewery called Pipeworks, and this is their barrel-aged Hyperdog. So Pipeworks, I hadn't heard of them before because they don't distribute out here at all. Apparently, they were established in Chicago in 2012 by two friends who homebrewed together and just thought, we should make a brewery. And so they did. And they started self-distributing in Chicago, and they still, in Chicago, they self-distribute. They have their own trucks where if you buy their beer for your store, your restaurant, or whatever, they come and they deliver it to you. They are also distributed by distributors in a couple of other states, New York, Connecticut, Colorado, and the Boston area. But I couldn't find much info on the Hyperdog. They had a picture of the bottle label on their website, and that was about it. So I don't know too many details about this. I only know that it's about 14% ABV. There have been a couple different versions of it. And I'm not even sure which version this is. I'm guessing it's the standard barrel age, but they also have one with chocolate, one with chili pepper, one with coffee.
Yours actually may be chocolate, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, I'll find out soon. But while I'm taking some sips, I'm going to let Robert talk about his final beer of the evening.
Final beer. Hey, I'm staying right here in Central Texas. Strangeland Brewing, The Last Gentleman. And again, I wanted to try something that I haven't had a lot of familiarity with, that didn't have my own opinions of before tonight. Mm-hmm. This is a bourbon porter. It's an American-style porter. It's per the brewery's website, these are bourbon-infused stays. So they're not actually from a bourbon barrel. They're actually infusing the stays in a 60 to 90-day finish out on this beer is what they're doing. So I think what we'll find there is that's probably a lighter style. It probably won't have so much of that bourbon flavoring into it. It's what they call an early winter porter. So it is be a little lighter. It's got a big head on it. It's very frothy, almost like a root beer float here.
Yeah.
Right. Maybe I didn't pour it properly, but in my haste. But I tell you, you can tell the body is a little lighter. It is a little creamier on top there. But it's a lighter style porter. But we're going to try this thing out. It's again an Austin, Texas brewery that's really taken off. They're doing some great things. A lot of press around here on this brewery, and I think maybe even tonight they're at one of the local cigar shops doing a tasting event. I know.
Oh wow.
Skip and Michael are over at Casa de Monte Cristo, or Skip is at Casa de Monte Cristo doing Whiskey Wednesday, so they're not there, but they're somewhere here in town. But we're going to give it a shot. The Last Gentleman, Strangeland Brewing, American Bourbon Porter, and I'm hoping this gets me up here in this last third of this cigar where I can really see something robust and something that's life-changing. But I'll get back to you after I take a few sips and
All right, Dennis, how about yours?
All right. I got a weird one for you. We've had some weird stuff on the show before, but I think this may be pretty close to the top of the cake. So this comes in at 8.7%. It comes from a brewery out in Long Island, New York, called Decadent Ales, and the label is really cool. So it's called S'mores. It's got a little guy on there. It's a nice label.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, kind of funky design, and it's exactly what you think. It is s'mores in a glass. Just super intense.
Kind of like Dino S'mores. Have you ever had that out of Chicago from Off Color?
It's more, yeah. So it's actually more intense, and I love Off Color.
Wow.
And it's more intense than that. It's literally that smoky campfire flavor. I don't know how they did it, but they managed to do it. And it's an IPA. It's a double dry hopped IPA, which is interesting.
Yeah.
They did a huge addition of Citra, and then they added, I have to read it off because there's a lot of stuff, but so they have marshmallows, graham crackers, Madagascar vanilla bean, cinnamon, and a touch of chocolate. And I think when they say touch, they mean a lot. Because to me, it really does taste like, imagine if you bite into a Payday, the peanut caramel bar, right? You bite into a Payday, but you cover that in Hershey's chocolate. That's what it tastes like. That's basically the IPA.
Wow.
That sounds
it's intense,
different, and very good.
And so the smell is really good.
So I've been trying to decode this Hype Dog. I believe this is the version that I don't know exactly what's in it. I'll try to look it up on their website while we're while the other guys are talking here. I believe this has chocolate and coffee in it. It may have something else, but I'm not sure what. But it's interesting because it's actually really close to the mouthfeel of the Cultivating Mass. But the bitterness, and it's got a little bit less sweetness, so it goes way better with the cigar. I'm trying to figure out what flavors I'm getting from the cigar. Strangely, I mean, the beer is very chocolatey, and I actually am now suddenly getting some like dark cocoa kind of flavors from the cigar, which it may be other flavors that are kind of piggybacking off of the flavor of the beer. But I definitely wasn't getting any chocolate before, and it doesn't heighten the spice very much, but it kind of highlights it a little bit. How's your pairing going there, Robert?
Well, I'm at that last third of the cigar, right where that main band is, and I think I can see Dennis is right about there. You're just a fraction behind us, but this beer is nothing like the description. It is sans bourbon. There's just no bourbon element to it at all for me, and maybe it's because it was an infused oak instead of actually using a barrel that actually was going to impart flavor for a longer 60, 90 days in a bourbon barrel would obviously infuse this with some great flavors and some of that charred oak, that char, that body you're looking for, but it doesn't have it. It's a sweeter beer. But it's very floral. It's almost putting me off. I feel like I just walked into an alfalfa barn, right? It smells of herbs and floral. It's not working for me. And this is the one I was most excited about. This should work because in this last third of this cigar, and the more I taste the beer, this last third really has a chocolate coffee, kind of like a cappuccino kind of thing going on, but it has a little bit of an anise, almost like a rock if you're Lebanese, but anise. It has this sambuca coffee and sambuca quality and aroma and flavor, and maybe that is overpowering the beer. And then it really gets that smoked meat, beef jerky, salt and pepper kind of plate of me on the last third, which is actually my favorite part of this. So I had higher hopes that this would complement it well, but either this cigar is just too strong on the last third, or they didn't put enough into this to really bring in those bourbon chocolate, rich sweetnesses, and it's more floral, and it's almost lighter than any of the other two beers I've
Interesting.
had. Not what I expected.
That's really strange. So I did figure out so my beer, my Hyper Dog, this is the barrel-aged Hyper Dog. It's 13% ABV, and this version, I believe, is the Imperial Milk Stout, brewed with dark matter coffee, vanilla beans, and cacao nibs, and then aged in 12-year Elijah Craig barrels. I'm getting coffee, cacao nibs, and vanilla bean. So I'm pretty sure that's what it is. And
Elijah Craig sounds about right.
Yeah, and that's what it tastes like.
Marriage in heaven with the rest of that cigar, I would think, just by definition there.
It's going very well with the cigar. But I also want to address a couple of audience questions from Chico Ray. So actually, first, Irving Tejeda says, "Been there, great bar." I don't know which bar he's talking about. I think
Rattle and Hum.
He might be talking about Rattle and Hum. Yeah. Chico Ray has two questions. First, have any of us had strawberry milk stout? He had it on Monday, and it was amazing. I've never had it, but that sounds amazing.
I have. The beauty of doing business with people in the cigar industry is you get to try some crazy combinations. I want to say it was winter 2015. I had a strawberry and a raspberry milk stout, and I'm trying to think of the brewery. It was a North Coast San Diego brewery, and I got to think of it. in a minute. And it might be one of the Belching Beavers or Mother Earth, because I know they're famous for their peanut butter porters. But I'm going to think about this milk stout in just a moment of who brought that to me while you guys chat a little bit.
Well, actually, I've got another question for you, also from Chico Ray. That's a very important question, which is where can he get Southern Draw in Orlando?
Chico, brother, our cigars are available to anybody that wants them, and we only want shops that want to have them. So we're not everywhere. We are in 500 shops. To my knowledge, are
you guys in Corona? I know they're in Orlando.
Not in Corona.
Okay.
I wish we were. I'd be proud to say we were. But Chico, if you will just shoot me a message or shoot you guys a message, I will find the closest retailer to you. And if it's not convenient for you, one of those Florida retailers will probably ship you whatever you would like, a sampler or something of that nature. One thing our retailers do a great job of is they reach out into the community and make sure that if you haven't tried them and you can't access them, they'll get them over to you so you can try them out. And what will happen is somebody local will decide they want to support the local market. But I appreciate the inquiry. But unfortunately, Florida's it's we started in the Panhandle and we're all the way down into the Keys, South Florida. But we need to get to that Orlando and the Tampa area and spend a little more time. So we'll get you the right place that can support you over there.
We'll find out after the show. I'll comment back on your question here, so we can let you know, Chico. Dennis, how's that final pairing going for you?
I've been
funky?
thinking about it. It's really funky. So the beer is cool. It's different. It's not it's not mind blowing in the sense of like I can have more than one. I think my limit on this beer would be half or maybe one. As far as the cigar goes, really interesting. I've noticed something, and I think Robert made a really cool point about the whole beef jerky salt kind of thing going on. When I hit that part of the cigar, I immediately thought of a beef jerky that I had. I can't remember the name, but it was a ghost pepper beef jerky. And it had that same sort of, you get the meatiness and you get that dryness, that sort of dry heat that has all that flavor. And all that flavor is carried in that dryness. And I like it, actually. So this is actually also my favorite third of the cigar. The pairing, I'm still kind of on the fence about.
There's definitely I just got to the point where I had to take the primary band off, if you will. And I'm definitely getting like that salty, spicy beef jerky kind of richness. It's really, really good. Really pleasant.
Umami, perhaps?
Umami. That's one way to say it.
If you sit out by a barbecue grill where you have ribs or a brisket or, a nice piece of beef that you traditionally seasoned with salt and pepper and that woodiness, when that smoke comes across your face, that's really what I get, that meaty, fatty kind of salt and pepper. And, I tell people, if you're going to smoke it, you should eat some protein anyway. So it might be good to go have a steak or, barbecue, go to your local barbecue place and then go enjoy it. But there's something about it that just, that brings that sitting by the smoker, sitting by the grill with that meat sizzling, that smoke coming off. That's what it does. To go back to the question on the strawberry milk stout, now I feel bad. I actually checked my notes, which I keep notes, believe it or not. It is a Texas brewery called Ranger Creek in San Antonio. And every year in the summer, they harvest, in Texas, it's known as Poteet, Texas, Poteet strawberries. And if you ever heard of Bluebell ice cream, their strawberry ice cream, they only take strawberries from Poteet, right? So it's kind of a famous community. But their strawberry milk stout that comes out, I think, late summer is the only one that I have had, according to my notes, and it's Ranger Creek Brewing in San Antonio, Texas.
Man, a strawberry milk stout just sounds like a fantastic combination. I've had when I started reading the question, I thought it was going to be about strawberry milkshake IPAs, which are good, but I feel like a strawberry milk stout is going to be like out of this world good.
It's one of those things you need a keg for your local family picnic or family reunion, and everybody gets schnockered because it's so sweet and so good. So even those people that like the corner and never talk, they'll drink it.
Yeah.
And we'll talkative, throw some horseshoes or whatever everybody does. But it's a great social beer, if I recall, and it's like sitting around homemade ice cream, which is something we do in the South. We have socials around it, but I think it's something everybody ought to try to find because I think it'll get people outside their box, right? Their comfort zone. They'll drink it and they'll get schnockered.
Yeah, and I've had a lot of beers that have those strawberry flavors, but aren't necessarily strawberry flavored. Right. And strawberry is like a really natural flavor in a stout.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that brings us to our final ad of the night. So this section is brought to you by our friends over at Drew Estate. Go buy the Pappy Van Winkle Tradition or the new Undercrown Sungrown, or if your shop has them yet, those little 4x32s, those little tins, those are fantastic. They're little 4x32s in a tin for $20. You can't go wrong with those things. And we're back. So I'm going to go back over my beers a little bit because I don't think I'm going to go back to the Cultivating Mass because it's not a bad beer, but I don't want to jack my palate up for this cigar. And the other two beers didn't jack my palate up, and that one did. So I'm going to take a couple sips of my my Bourbon County here. Now that it's been sitting out, warming up a little bit. So I don't remember if I mentioned it before, but this is actually 60 IBUs, which is pretty bitter for a barley wine. And that bitterness really comes through. But it's kind of balanced by the sweetness of the barrel aging and just kind of the natural sweetness of a barley wine that they have. And I think now that I've been smoking more of the cigar brings out a lot of fruitiness in the beer. And the beer is still kind of bringing out those spicy notes, which I really like. The other beers kind of cover up the spice a little bit. And I mean, with Pennsylvania broadleaf, it's all about spice.
Absolutely. That and that Esteli Ligero, of course.
Yeah, and of course the Esteli Ligero.
Yeah. Some pairings are successful, some are failures. Not all of them are complementary. Some of them are contrasting. That El Cedro was a perfect starter for the first third of this cigar. And I know we started our cigars a few minutes before the broadcast, but again, noted that it really brought out this fruitiness in the beer, kind of this dried fruit, flavor on the cigar when it started. So it really did that. And I tell you, that Citra did nothing to conflict it. It really allowed the cigar to shine through, but the beer was still nice and clean and rich. And the cedar notes on it were just kind of a perfect complement to get started. When I stepped up to that Belgian triple, just incredible distinction in the second third of that cigar, which is where that clove and some of those other spices and that salt and pepper spice started coming through. But the triple wasn't so heavy that it left a sweet or syrupy or thick coating on my palate, right? So it was perfect. And unfortunately for me, the big disappointment was this bourbon porter. And nothing against the bourbon porter, nothing against the brewery at all, but it did not end with the power and the richness and that bourbon flavor, that big charred oak that I thought I would get for this last third of the cigar, which I think this third needed it. This third's got a lot of power, and it's got a lot of richness and meatiness, and I think it just overpowered the beer to a point where I almost, if I could do it again, I would start with the Last Gentleman first, then move to the El Cedro, and then the triple afterwards. But the first two were perfect. They worked well. And next time, I think I would go to Dennis's s'more beer, because that seemed like the way to finish any meal, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Dennis, how about your pairings?
So I'm just going back through all my pairings, and the s'more was good, and it's still good, and it fits well. And that's one of those things where I feel like it would fit well from the beginning to the end of the cigar. But the one pairing that really did it for me, believe it or not, was this coffee lemonade IPA, because it's still allows a cigar to sort of you get a lot of the cigar flavors. You notice, right? It's still there. You get the meatiness. You still get all the essence of the cigar without being overpowered by the drink. Meanwhile, you can still also enjoy the drink as well, and that's a really nice balance. So for me, I'd say that's probably the best one of the night.
So a lot of times we give our pairings ratings, and I'm gonna actually go back a little bit, and if I were to change the order of these, the Bourbon County barley wine, I'm only showing this top label because it says Bourbon County there, but you guys can't even read that. So all three of these get a 95. Actually, I'm going back, even the bad one, because the Bourbon County brings out some of like the real spice and intensity of that first third. In the second third, it starts to settle down a little bit, and it starts to take on that meaty quality, but it's really kind of a mix of sweet and earth and a lot of spice still. And I feel like the Pipeworks Hyper Dog, I keep thinking it's Hype Dash Dog, but it's Hyper Dog, goes really well with that second third. And then once you get into the meatiness, which I wasn't there yet when I started drinking my Breakside Cultivating Mass, and that actually goes really well with the final third of this. So, I mean, the lesson there is, if you're going to smoke this cigar, open 3 different beers and drink one for each third.
It's definitely complex. Yeah, it warrants 3 different drinks.
I mean,
it can stand up to it.
It's got those transitions that, Robert, you were talking about that before the show, and
yeah.
I don't think I gave the transitions quite enough credit before doing this pairing. There are some really distinct transitions in this cigar.
Right, and I'm glad you noticed. I don't know if you just stayed with Bourbon County, if you would have experienced the same transitions in this cigar. Maybe that happened for you, but you got to open that door. You forced your palate to adjust those 3 years, and as such, you were able to enjoy the transitions in the cigar. It's not a pride thing, but we really strive to create a cigar that does have 3 unique thirds in our core line. The Quick Draw line really is all about one flavor, one body, and just push it through to the end. But these are really intended that way. That's how they're bunched. That's how they're blended. There's not really any subtle nuances that are accidental, right? So, for me, what I wanted to accomplish was kind of go a lot lighter. I started lighter than I thought I should to kind of see. But the other thought for me was I really haven't been drinking. I've been on the wagon for a bit, trying to eat healthier and do some things. Unfortunately, brother Skip Martin knocked me off a little bit, but
Skip's got a way of doing that.
And when you got 5,000 bottles of beer in your HQ, and most of those are rare and difficult to get, and way outside my budget, you just say thank you. But that El Cedro was a perfect way to start, perfect way to come back to the team, and put that beautiful bright flavor profile and those nice citrus notes and those cedar notes there. Again, I'm like you, 94, 95. If I would suggest it to anybody. I think when this cigar comes out in a Lancero, it's going to be a whole other ball game.
Oh man,
stronger and goes stronger and stronger. That second third, just before you get to that secondary band, to me, it's more distinct transition than the second to the third. But that Belgian triple was perfect. It was rich enough to carry it. It really brought out a lot of those spices and kind of what a brewing spice would do for you in a beer, right? Dennis had six hops in one. I mean, that just kind of blows my mind of the complexity that beer must have had in it. So, again, I'm going to say 94 to 95 on that second third and the second pairing with the Adalbert's Brewing Triple B, big. What did I say?
Big boy brew.
Big boy brew. Nicely done. And they're new to me, so I'm going to give them some hype after this. And unfortunately, I don't want to to disparage Strangeland Brewing because they've got a lot of good things going on. But I think if I would have really thought about it, that a light style early winter porter was really lighter than I anticipated. It really didn't have the body yet. It didn't have the age that it needed to really stand up to this last third. It was probably just my mistake. I fell in love with this Last Gentleman bourbon porter, and when you see that, on a little shelf with dust on the bottle, you go, that's got to be the one to finish the night. And I made a mistake, but I would drink that beer again. But I would probably move to something with more body, a little more power. What we find in porters and stouts this time of year is if we can get to that 10 to 12, 13%, they've got some age, they've got some depth, they've got complexity, and it really needed it for this last third of the cigar. So shame on me for that, but I'll correct it, rest assured.
What about you, Dennis?
You know what? For me, so overall for the total cigar, the Coffeenade, that was my first pairing. That comes in at about 94. Unfortunately, can't say the same for the second pairing, which was the Boom Sauce from Lord Hobo. The hops were too strong. It was just too much. It was a great beer, really complex. It didn't do anything for the cigar, and it kind of, I feel like it took away from the flavors of the cigar at that point. And I feel like it would have done the same throughout the whole cigar. So that's about an 89. Strong 89, maybe 90. And the Decadent, it's definitely very decadent. That's without a doubt. It's an intense beer. But, that's a good 90 for me. Yeah, I think tonight the coffee lemonade really wins the prize.
Nice. And before we close out, Chico Ray says, in other words, we got to make sure we eat before smoking the cigar.
Oh,
that is a resounding yes.
You must. So this cigar, basically, to me, if I were to describe it to somebody that's never had it before, I would say this is a firecracker wrapped in velvet. That's what it is. It's great.
That's a good way to put it. It starts off and it lets you know where it's going.
Yeah.
And then the spice slowly diminishes, but it does get stronger from there. It really lets you know that it's going to be a strong cigar as soon as you light it, with all that that pepper and that spice and that intensity, and just like the richness. But then as the spice goes down, the richness comes up, and so does the power. This is a strong cigar. We were talking to John last night about how we were going to have this show, Surgeon. And he was saying how he smoked it for breakfast at IPCPR, and Robert could not believe his eyes.
John and one other gentleman that is not to be named from Fayetteville, North Carolina, that may or may not be a Drew State rep, smoked it for breakfast. And one of which, I won't name any names, was horizontal pretty quickly.
I could see that with this cigar. This is cigar.
To be the first to smoke the Gordo for 8 o'clock breakfast, even before the show opened. I went, more power to you. I've been smoking it for a few years, and I will tell you that if it didn't have the amount of age on it, it would be a much more powerful cigar. This is actually one of those cigars that mellows out. It gets more complexity, but it mellows out on the nicotine with time. But when this was a new blend and first hit the aging room, brother, it was to use a line from Walk the Line, the movie, sit down, kneel down, or lie down.
Yeah.
Brother, but I say eat a little bit of protein. It's not for vegans, man. If all you eat's cauliflower and lentils, not cigar.
I would agree with that. I mean, I could see. I was thinking before when you were talking about like smoking a brisket, I could see cutting up some brisket and just sitting there and slowly eating brisket while I'm smoking this cigar.
Yes.
That would be a good pairing.
Yeah, it'd be beautiful. Beautiful.
All right, and that brings us to the end of the show. We went a little bit over, but that's all right. That's what we do sometimes. Thank you, everybody, for watching, especially our Armed Forces Radio Network listeners. We appreciate you guys out there doing things we're not built to do, except for Robert. I do want to recognize Robert. You are a veteran. Thank you for your service. And again, thank you to everybody out there listening, watching. Thank you for your comments. We appreciate you guys supporting us in hanging out and doing what we love to do. Everybody, we want you to drink better, but we want you to drink less.